Hello, I'm Mike McMullen, President of the Carroll County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our webinar series right now that we're doing. We're not meeting in person because of COVID-19, but we're having some excellent informational webinars, and I'm happy to be able to host the one we have today. I first off want to thank our friends at CMC. These guys are great. They deserve your support. They are a nonprofit. Any support you can throw their way is so appreciated. They don't only just help us to coordinate this show, they stream it live on their website, on their Facebook page, and on Channel 19. And without them, we would probably do these things, but they'd probably all crash and burn. That's all I'm going to say, because I'm not that good with this stuff. These guys are. So thank you so much to CMC. And at the end, I'll give them a chance to say a couple words about themselves. I want to encourage you, go to our website, carrollcountychamber.org. We have over 600 businesses listed. And in spite of COVID-19 and all the lockdown that they're under and all of that, they're either physically still open or they're virtually still open.
I'm Tiambe Page from Cultivated, and we're open.
I'm Katie Kirby from Together We Own It, and we're open.
I'm Bob Coffey from Coffee Music, and we are open.
I'm Steve Lowe from 127 Creative.
I'm Andrea Norfolk, president of Shoreline Destinations.
I'm Teresa Bethune with Info Pathways and Freedom Broadband.
Carroll Lutheran Village.
Hud's Property Management.
Kelly Fager, Professional Development and Training.
Modern Comfort Systems.
The City of Westminster.
Mutual of Omaha Mortgage.
Carroll Community College.
Love It at Stella's Bridal.
Carroll Occupational Health.
Atlantic Blue.
The Pub Dog Brewing Company.
Dean Robert Camlin, Associates Architect.
I'm Jim Brewer from Maggie's.
Fisher Tire and Auto Service.
Braided Home, in-home care and assistance.
Laser Edges Engraving and Dash Custom Tees.
JKS Home Improvement.
Magellan Quality Water.
Crawford Yingling Insurance.
McDaniel College.
Startup Portal.
And we're open.
And we are open.
And we're open.
And we are open for business.
And we're open.
And we're open.
And we're open.
We are open.
We are open.
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 Open. Open.
Open. Open.
And we're open. We are the businesses of the Carroll County Chamber of Commerce.
And we want you to know that most of us are still open for business.
In spite of COVID-19.
And we're all struggling to get through.
So before you shop online with Amazon,
check us out.
From accountants to vineyards.
And everything in between.
Many of us are offering online services.
And even shipping to your home.
You can find all of us at
www.carrollcountychamber.org.
So be kind,
stay safe,
And shop local.
We're all in this together.
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 together.
Well, that video was a lot of fun to make. We threw it together really fast, and I'll tell you, people are interested in keeping money local. That's where it's at right now. In spite of the Amazons of the world that seem to be trying to gobble everybody up and all the different regulations out there that are forcing businesses to close their doors, there's still so many who are open. If you call them up, if you go online and you shop from them, I would highly recommend doing that. Amazon may seem easy, but the fact is we need to help these folks out. Our small business folks need our assistance, or some of them won't be able to open again. Depends on how long things go. So it is important, and it's something that you can do, keeping your money local. So thank you for showing that, our friends at CMC. So a couple of announcements. We are now accepting applications for the Carroll Biz Challenge. So if there's ever been a time when you wanted to start up a business, watching this show and getting motivated, this is it. If you know anybody who's an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs have courage and guts, especially at a time like this, to think, well, maybe I'll start up a business, when a lot of them are actually shut down right now. But the fact is, small business is what drives the economic engine of our area and of the U.S. and probably the entire world. So please fill out an application. It's free to do that. Go to carrollbizchallenge.com. You have till the end of the month. The grand prize that'll be awarded at our live event in August is $5,000, which is a nice amount of money. That's just the cash. There's about 15 grand in other things. Leadership Carroll, if you've ever heard of it, we're taking applications. We've got room for about 2 or 3 more folks for this next year's class, which starts in September. So if you've ever been interested, Don't delay, don't wait, sign up now. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, May 7th, we've got a after hours networking event that you're invited to attend. It's our first one, so have a little patience with us, be kind with us. We'll see how it goes, but you can go to our website, look to our calendar of events, and you can register for that. May 13th, next Wednesday, we've got an amazing webinar with Anirban Basu, if you've ever heard of him. He is a brilliant economist who's also hilarious. So it's a pretty dry thing to talk about, but he makes it so fun, and it's free. We've already got about 400 folks signed up for it, and we can take more. So go to our website for that one. That's going to be May 13th at 8:30. May 19th, we have an after-hours event. It's another actual virtual networking event to meet some of our newer members who've joined. That ought to be a lot of fun. May 21st, we just added a webinar featuring Missy Wilcox, who's the president of MarketWorks. Her topic is "You Are Here: Re-Entry Ways to Realize Success in Today's COVID World." She does a lot of actual marketing work, and I'm sure that her advice is going to be great too. So with all that being said, the way we're going to handle questions today, first off, everybody does have their actual microphones muted, which is great. So if you would stay actually muted until it's your turn to talk. There will be some time during the course of Rick's slides where you'll be able to ask some questions. If you have a question before that, you can always click the raise hand button. If you're familiar with Zoom, you go down on the bottom to where it says participants, hover your mouse over it, and off to the right side, there's a place where you can raise your virtual hand, and you can also chat to everybody too. So with all that being said, I don't want to delay any longer. I want to get into the actual meat of our show today. And I want to introduce you to Mr. Rick Leimbach of Startup Portal. And he's going to be telling us all about shifting business like a startup. Rick, they're all yours.
There you go. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. And thank you everyone for coming today. It's I guess it's an opportunity for hopefully all of us to share some information, ask some questions, and sort of give my side of the story, being a former CFO, former controller of different companies, some small, publicly traded, and doing outsourced CFO consulting for about the last 7 to 8 years. So I've seen the insides of different companies, and Startup Portal is a derivative of all that work, seeing, in essence, startups and experiencing startups where, at the beginning it's so difficult and they need information. And that real shift comes into actual operating businesses today, because we've all been set back a little bit to say, where's the future? How do I operate in the future? Irrespective of COVID-19, this shift is happening with cloud-based systems, AI technology, et cetera. So hopefully I can share some information. Feel free to ask questions. And obviously, as we go through at the end, or if you need to contact me afterwards. So Richard, if you want to throw the slides up. So one of the highlights today is really, I'm going to talk about the model, and it's going to be a business model, a personal business model for business owners. Whether you're a startup or an operating business, really looking at, what is your model on a go-forward basis. Next slide, please. As I mentioned about myself, I've been 25 plus years experience. I've done a lot of work with companies raising capital. So I've seen the upside and the downside on a smaller scale, higher scale, and it's something that, combined with how operations on the backside, I think I have a pretty good blend today to show you different facets. And we're going to take questions as we get through a couple different areas. Next slide, please. So agenda today, I'll just give you a little my perspective on the current environment, talk about business in the cloud. And obviously, we're all on Zoom. 6 months ago, we never would have imagined. So business in the cloud is happening faster than even anticipated. Talking about your future revenue model, I'm going to look and follow up a little bit from last week's seminar about short-term, long-term cash planning. And one aspect that hopefully everybody enjoys that's at the end is talk about raising capital. Equity crowdfunding is something that I fit very well into. I've seen a lot of, and it's coming down the road for us. So it's an example of just sort of the change in capital raise. Next slide, please. So from a perspective of the current environment, one of my concerns and what I've seen, one of the positives I've seen is many companies, numerous of my clients have received the PPP plan funding and the loan funding. And it's an 8-week program. And even at, yesterday, working with the client to look at, okay, what's the time frame of the next 8 weeks? What's that impact have on companies? The requirements are you spend it on payroll, 75% on payroll in an 8-week period. So the clock is ticking. So if you've received funding, it's beginning of May, we're going to have funding for payroll for May and June. The concern is if we don't open up by June, and most companies have a 30-day business cycle, when we get into July and August, the element of cash flow will come into play. And many companies are going to relook at it in the next 30, 60 days to say, okay, where am I going? How long is it going to take? And can it fit into my business plan? So that's where my concern from a timing is, just making sure that July and August, we're up, operating and running, even partially, I think will be impactful. The other next aspect would be planning. One of the aspects I've seen over time is that I want to know, I want to write it down. I truly want to know as a business owner if I'm going to hit a wall, right, from a cash flow perspective. So if I'm going to hit that wall, let's put it on paper, see what the payrolls are, see what the revenue's coming in, and at least know now versus a week before, a day before I hit the wall. And that really particularly comes into play when you have employees, just for the fact that you may have a every other week payroll cycle or a monthly payroll cycle, et cetera. But if you come to the point where you're impacting employees without at least everyone knowing and understanding, it can be very hurtful to yourself and to them as well. And look, I've been in the past, especially, and I'll talk about 2008 in a moment, but I've been to the point where you have to tell employees that, hey, you're not getting paid this week. And we're going to make, obviously we made it up, but because of cash flow timing, it happened. Even to the extent I didn't get paid, and I think many on the call probably feel this, I didn't get paid, but I was sending money to make sure employees got paid at certain times. So really you want to make sure that professionally and personally, you don't hit that wall. And if you're going to hit it, make sure you're going to hit it and, plan it out and try to make some decisions early. The next aspect that being part of the Maryland Association of CPAs, they have been tremendous as preparing us for the future. One of the aspects is, are you future ready? And Tom Hood at the MACPA is fantastic with looking to AI technology, cloud technology, for accounting and financial professionals. So I really look at your own industry and make sure you're in tune with, hey, are they preparing us for the future? And the last point here is trust your advisors. It's what most of us in hard times likely keep things close to the cuff. I would suspect that if you talk to your accountant, your attorney, et cetera, and just let them know what's going on, your bankers, early on, and just have a game plan for it. So the old don't wait to communicate is key. And honestly, you keep it too close. I mean, that's where, you can really put stress on yourself. And personally, I've CFO of a company, you take the pride to be CFO. And honestly, we had a new CEO come in and he saw that I held things close to the cuff. He said, Rick, you don't have to do it all yourself. So I took that to heart and I passed this down to people to say, look, trust your advisors, get some advice. And, I think it'll help you in the long term. Next slide. Here at the Chamber, as the MACPA, phenomenal how the lessons we're learning from Tiambe's experience in the first session of how to change your business model rapidly, quickly, and almost for self-preservation, to Doug's plan on his smart strategies. Hopefully I'll add some tidbits here today. And then the commissioners, hopefully they'll pass down the aspect of Annapolis and what's happening there to our local communities and help us make decisions on, the short term. And quite frankly, with this change, maybe the long term as well. Say, hey, how do we operate in Carroll County, Maryland? Next slide. Now, I talked about 2008, and one of the aspects of 2008 that I saw, and basically the chart to the left shows a tremendous dip. Obviously, we can't see that dip today on our charts because they're not updated, but we were all in that dip. And for myself, I didn't realize, hey, we were really down pretty low when you're operating a business, the CFO of a company, and trying to keep payroll running. It wasn't until a couple years later that I was at a session at Towson. One of the economics professors put the chart there. And I stepped back and said, hey, wait a second. I was in that. I lived that, which I don't think we'd ever, at least in my career, seen it. So I think from perspective, we all have to take that as, for long-term planning, let's just look and keep pushing to the upside because it's a dip. And going forward, that will, I think, turn around. And obviously, we don't know when, but in history really shows that most of the time it is a dip. And that's where we can really plan forward. To the right, as Mike mentioned, Anibal Basu, I've heard him in the past. He's phenomenal. But one of the things we can take from him as we're planning is, hey, what does he see that we don't see sort of in the micro and macroeconomic in the area? As I mentioned to Mike earlier, I want to know, what's the impact of the Port of Baltimore? Are container ships sitting out on in the ocean, or things being slowed down that might impact our drop shipments or something of that nature? So as Mike mentioned, lots of folks signed up, but highly encouraged to listen to him and really absorb it for yourself. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to shift a little bit to cloud-based business processes. We're living it today with Zoom, but really, if you're a business that's been established for 5, 10, 15 years, and you're doing processes the same way for all of these years, you really have to take some time, maybe in this pause of business, and to look up to say, how do I change? One of the aspects that we teach here is that Google G Suite platform, you can start a business, and it's kind of the premise of Startup Portal. You can start a business for $6 per person per month, and that provides you with IT backbone, your communication for your emails, your Google Meet. Startup Portal's website is built within G Suite, and the Google Forms that you link into. All of that is put together very easily. I take no credit for the graphics, but very easily for startups. So we teach that basis. And my premise with that is that I don't want you thinking you have to have $100,000 to start up a business. I want you thinking, if I can do with $100 a month for the first year or two to get my premise and my platform together, and I have all the IT communicate, or the IT infrastructure, the communication, the whole, everything I need to operate as a business, there's no reason to really take other people's money, and quite frankly, sometimes it might be grandma's money. So there's danger to that, just for the fact that I profess, always think about Thanksgiving dinner, right? If you do business with grandma, you got to go to Thanksgiving, and there's two questions going to be asked: what happened, or how we doing? So it's one of the things. Just be very careful as you go forward. The next part of this is really the apps. This is where, for myself, putting together our industry-based apps that connect and operate in the web, that are very efficient, from timesheets, inventory, shipping, all within, whether it's a CRM program or a QuickBooks Online that tie in with thirdapps.com. Basically, the flow of activity will be coming in the future, where an email may come to you, your computer may pick up that email and absorb it into your accounting system and code it for you, where then you have your data put together and your invoices attached. In today's world, if you're sending out stamps with an invoice, you really have to step back and think, first of all, it's costing 50 cents a stamp. But secondly, someone else is going to come and they're actually going to end up, perfecting that a little better in the cloud and make it seamless for the end user customer. So as much as 50 cents may not seem like a big deal, adding up over time it is, but more importantly, someone else is going to basically get their payment from a customer, let's say, from a cash receipt, faster and sooner, and be able to adjust their working capital, let's say, in their business. So the other element here that we're living is the communication. I've been using Slack for probably a good year and a half, 2 years now, with G Suite, with my staff, where it's a way of communicating just like Zoom, that you don't feel like you have to come into the office every day and have your finger on the pulse. So the communication element to operating a business is critical. And that's where, the Slack, the Google Meets, the Zoom, et cetera, come into play. Next slide, please. And on top of that, the element of project management, the Asanas, the Mondays, project management tools, industry-based tools. I have my specific examples relate to accounting. Your industry is changing, whether you know it or not. So I highly recommend going out and looking to say, hey, where are we shifting in the industry? The artificial intelligence element of it. And many folks won't think of accounting as with artificial intelligence, but at the end of the day, the simple invoice coming through an email, getting into your system, is evolving, and the information is evolving, so you can have real-time data. And every industry is going to change like this, and some of it may be for very, very positive elements to it, where you can bring back manufacturing from other countries to the U.S. because you have artificial intelligence, you have robotics element to it, and the educated employee will be able to run the business here versus elsewhere. Next part of it, just the equipment, the hardware, et cetera. If you have equipment and hardware that is old, you have to have a game plan for the future to say, what do we really need? Quite frankly, at Startup Portal, we're right now, we're set with Chromebooks. So there's it's all cloud-based, Chrome-based, Google-based. That may change over time, but if you're looking at hardware today, you really have to look at what investment do I need to make over the next basically 3 to 5 years to make sure you're able to participate in the evolving technology, IT infrastructure that's coming about. So it's really about budgeting. And I know Doug Howard mentioned that last week in his plan, just looking at how you budget those elements. It's critical. And again, I'm relating it to everyone's specific industry. So you really have to do your research and plan out. Next slide, please. Now, here's where we get into your actual revenue model. This first bullet point, I guess I would say that, and it does relate to revenue models in the sense that I have this approach that when I have a client, that basically I have a downside with the client. For example, someone moves on or someone doesn't get a capital raise or something of that nature. Typically I have a 24-hour rule because it seems like in business, something positive happens. So you try to take the ups with the downs and get a steady eddy. And we may be in some down periods here, but you really have to take that approach, because if you're reaching out to people and you're communicating and you're networking and you're going to chamber events, you can see good things happen. So just the steady eddy of it. And it really goes to the revenue model, because you may have 20, 30% of your revenue right now not there, not in existence. So you have to think about, okay, how am I going to change my revenue model to A, fit the future, and B, maybe mitigate some of my risk? Because if you have a customer concentration that's too high, you may want to look at, okay, what are we doing? So that's where, the service revenue models are changing, where a lot of billing is value price billing, versus an hourly billing. And you can see to the right in a little sample of just a simple QuickBooks, where they do a value price billing saying, hey, the bottom where you start possibly is $12 a month. The advance is about $45. And obviously in the value-based billing, they want you right in the middle, which is most recommended. So looking at how do I have a service offering that allows you to provide service to different elements of customers without pigeonholing you to being in servicing individual customers and having individual needs from customers. So it's really about what is your business revenue model that can solve problems for a customer, customers, let's say, where you may average out from I have here the $4.99 a month, let's say. You can average out services where one customer may get a little more, one may get a little less, but from an overall service cost offering, fulfilling that cost, allows you to have a business model where someone calls up and says, hey, I need this. Hey, you fit into this service offering. So I know I've attended, whether it's through the MACPA or QuickBooks does a very good job in just professing the value pricing. Again, look at your industry, see how things are being done, or look at the value-based element to it to say, hey, would that fit me in what I'm offering? And allow you to come into your own business model. What is your service element? What is your offering? Another element is you have to be cautious of industry consolidations. The mom and pops that have been operating as family businesses, could end up consolidating from an industry perspective. Private equity groups come in and one example that you'll see a little later, but the funeral home industry. My understanding is that a lot of consolidation has been done. It's just been on the back end where the names stay the same, but maybe the consolidation's been done over the years. So is your industry going to consolidate over the next 5, 10 years? And quite frankly, that's the impact potentially of Amazon. What's the Amazon impact to your business? To see, hey, are they dynamically changing the business where my customers now say, hey, look, I can get it cheaper on Amazon and I can get drop ship next day delivery. So what's the impact to your business if you have that type of offering? Next slide, please. In the change of the revenue model, when you have that customer relationship, that matters. So the reality is your service offering has to be a key element, especially for smaller businesses. Just for the fact that you really know someone can go on Amazon and probably get certain components cheaper. The real key, in my opinion, is that do you have the solution to solve problems, right? Where they're calling you up for the solutions, and they may or may not order the components from you. Quite frankly, you're not going to make a lot of money on the components if someone can get it cheaper. But you have the real solution to the problem that the customer's calling you to help them. So really strive to basically look at how your offering comes into play. Is it a value-based offering? Is it a monthly service versus a product sale? And also look at how your underlying costs play into that. And really, am I profitable with my service element, my labor cost, if there are equipment or component cost, and really what's my profit margin on that? And again, what are others doing? What's happening in the industry? One of the things I like to do is when helping individuals' business plans, the Baltimore Business Journal or any business journal has the book of lists. And I go through and I look at companies, say in software industry. Sometimes they'll put how much revenue they've generated and how much, basically, how many employees they have. So I'm able to benchmark locally revenue per employee when I'm developing a plan. So it allows me to see, okay, is my revenue per employee comparable to others? Is it higher or lower? What do I need to do? Obviously, you want it to be higher, but in some cases, it may be that you need to make changes where you have to get a little more involved in the industry to say, okay, what is going on that I'm missing? Concentration of customers. One of the elements there right now, I'm sure companies are feeling is we had some really good customers for a really long time, and they're a bulk of our revenue or a significant amount of revenue. Well, when they pull back, what's the impact to you? It's, basically it's the waterfall effect. So really, as you plan for the future, I want to see, are there other services we can provide where we're at 50% of our current offering, where we can mitigate our risk and not have such a concentration of customers? Can we go after another element of service to other customers that are new to us at a smaller rate, different service level? So again, sort of that value-based billing, but really what you're thinking about how at the end of the day, my revenue that I'm generating protects myself, the entity, or employees, and we don't have exposure on concentration of clients, high accounts receivable, where we let customers go 30, 60, 90 days without having a conversation. So I really want you to be in tune with how you operate as a business model. For myself, certain of my clients, quite frankly, most of my clients with monthly offerings that I have, I bill on the first of that month for that month. So I'm not performing service for an entire month and then sending an invoice. And typically we have 15-day terms. So in all fairness, I'm averaging out to getting paid around the 15th. I'm doing work. So it's a trade-off. It's a balance. But as I express up front in my contract to my customers, this is how we do business. And, it gives me the confidence to say, okay, I know what's going on with each customer. And I'm not 60 days later and they're like, well, we've moved on somewhere else. So it helps communication as well. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to take a break here. I've said a lot on a short period of time. So if you have questions that, throw them out here, I'd be glad to answer.
Not seeing any hands right now.
All right, at least I got a water break.
Well, that's okay. Let's take a look. I don't have the whole screen visible here. So if anybody has a question at this point, either please raise your hand or shoot a chat up. I don't think we do. I think we can get back to presenting.
All right, let's move on. All right, so now we're going to talk short-term, long-term on cash planning. One of the elements that I profess is, especially if you're in a tight cash situation, you got to look 13 weeks out. Now, the reality is you should know the next 4 weeks. The other weeks are really help you plan and understand, the payroll element every 2 weeks and those type of items. But really look next 4 weeks, if you have a tight cash flow situation, is critical. Again, if you have PPP loan funding, looking out 8 weeks to say, okay, how do I spend the requirements on payroll? Also, what happens after those time elements come about? What's the impact to us as a business? The communication side, especially in tough situations. Customers, vendors, employees, upfront communication. Quite frankly, not everybody needs to know everything, but pertinent items, calling customers if they're delinquent on payments or receivables, or really getting into making that call to get an understanding why. And quite frankly, they may not want to make that call. Therefore, you may have to, have that conversation and say, hey, what can you pay? Can we do a plan? Something of that nature that allows you not to basically have gaps in communication. With your vendors, I highly communicate, talking to them as well. If you're in a situation that you needed additional time to pay, let them know ahead of time because they're doing their own cash planning. Quite frankly, years ago, I had a vendor who didn't call back and he showed up at my office. So hopefully it doesn't happen to anybody. Anyway, the employees as well. I mean, everyone is realistic of the environment and what's happening. So with employees, just making sure, they're in tune to, hey, are we going to be okay? And if you're not, giving them fair warning and is fair as well. Contracts. If you have contracts that are complicated, convoluted, have lots of terms, I'd suggest going back and just looking those contracts. Can my customers cancel in 30 days? Is there minimum commitments that I have or they have that we may need to look at just to make sure you're covered, especially with larger contracts that you have a dependency. Again, we can't see through other people's walls. So they have their businesses and you have yours. So just the communication element of it and understand what where it is for you. The unemployment impact, having employees that, have to be laid off. When do you bring them back? What's the impact to your business? Just having those as relevant as can be in your game plan and what you understand is very helpful. And then one element that I'm putting in here is short term, but it's really a combination of both. I think most of the banks have been very reasonable about debt covenants and loan agreements and forbearance agreements, et cetera. But bankers have requirements as well. So really with that, I look at almost a 6-month approach to say, okay, I'm okay for the next 30 to 60 days. What's the impact on my business 120 days from now? Am I going to be going to have issues in the debt covenants, et cetera. And there may be time today when things are, can be planned out versus 6 months from now when you go in and have an issue and they say, well, why didn't you tell us before? So just something to look at and sort of, I put on here, check twice, because typically it's a calculation or a ratio that, you've signed up to. So just communicate. Next slide, please. The long-term element. Doug mentioned last week about the projections. I look at, detailed year 1 and 2 of projections, monthly detail, to really own your business model and own where you're going, what you expect from revenue, how many employees you expect, what are your operating costs, what are your margins. Years 3 through 5 really can be part of a planning wish element to it, to say, hey, if we can do this, where can we take the business? What capital do we need in the short term, in the long term? Do we need, can a bank loan cover us? Or do we need equity to come in and help us get to the next level? Are we going to be consolidating? Are we going to acquire businesses? Those type of things can be put into a plan from a long-term perspective. And quite frankly, it really gives you self-guidance. And if you look at that and adjust year to year, it really gives you the sense of, hey, this is where we're heading overall as a business. Managing loans and lines of credits. As I mentioned before, the banking relationships are key in your business. And I have respect for the banks in the sense that most of us go to the banks for interest rates that are very low, and they hold us accountable to keeping the risk very low, comparable to that. With that said, if you're going to a bank when you tremendously need a loan, it's going to be difficult. So one of the things in your 3 to long-term planning is if you need lines of credit, if you need to convert your current debt to a long-term note, the best time to do that, quite frankly, is when you don't need it. Having that line of credit in place, even though there's a small fee year to year, and you have an industry that requires a line of credit, or you need it from time to time, it's important to just make sure it's, you find the right banking relationship and you do it at a time that they don't look at you as in struggle. In all fairness, the rates are very cheap and they're going to mitigate the risk. So best time when you don't need it. And obviously talking about the revenue models. What's your new revenue model if you need one? What's in a long-term plan and how you can roll that out, not overnight, but over time if necessary, in sort of evolving to allow you to have different offerings without basically disrupting your current revenue stream. So there's a lot of thinking through that may have to happen as you go through that. And obviously I mentioned the cloud, AI technology, things that are coming down the road are the gig economy where you may hire individuals or outsource individual work versus bringing on employees. Maybe more expensive, long-term may be cheaper and allow you to do different elements to it. That's evolving as we go as well for many, many industries. Next tab. And here I'm just throwing out sort of a sense of, hey, how would you look? This is sort of a startup element, but if you're embedding a new product down the road, here's an expectations. Year 1 and 2 in this example, you have volume of 1,000 to 15,000 units you may sell in those years. Well, they're test years. They're setting it up to understand my business. And really what I speak to, and if I were going into a bank or investors, I'd speak to year 5, because year 5 is really intent of year 5 through 20. Hey, we're able to do 750,000 in sales. We have 12% profit, gross margins of 72%. And we're operating a business as a business with our expenses went from 25,000, which means you were doing all the work, to 450 means you have payroll. And quite frankly, you may pay your salary. So that's how, and obviously, from a template standpoint, you can lay it out just to understand yourself. Next slide, please. And then here, if there's questions, comments. All right, I'm not seeing any, Mike.
I don't think I see any yet, so keep on going, Rick.
All right, we'll keep going through. So this part is, this is the fun stuff in some respects. Just for the fact you got Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank on the picture. But the reality is, in 2012, they had the Jobs Act that changed crowdfunding from being able to send $10 to get a t-shirt to now being able to invest in companies via equity crowdfunding. And really, it's evolving because the rules took so long. Just in the last 2 years, the rules have come about on how it works. But essentially, the Kevin O'Learys of the world are validating this industry. And what happens is you're able to raise, $107,000 to $1 million via basically crowdfunding portals, and that are regulated by FINRA. And there are about 50 portals right now out there. In essence, there's probably 10 that are the strongest portals. But you're able to raise up to $107,000 without having significant requirements. And even this week, the SEC came out and mitigated some of those requirements for the next 3 months to allow companies to raise capital via equity crowdfunding in this environment. So basically, you have individuals can go into these portals, invest $100 in different companies they may like, and it's the industry is turning. It's shaping up to be a viable solution. And the Kevin O'Learys of the world are truly validating, and obviously there's a personal interest in it, but it does help with the validation. In the midst of that, it's very creative as well. You can actually do revenue sharing opportunities where you may say, hey, I need equipment that's going to cost $150,000. I'll set up a revenue share agreement and I'll share my revenue from that new equipment over X period of time to get people their money back and get a return on their investment. So you can be very creative with it. Most of the big ones are not, but there's some other niche ones that are. And quite frankly, I didn't put it on here, but real estate. There's equity crowdfunding in real estate where you can invest in, sort of a housing development or a resort in small amounts. So from an investor standpoint, I don't think it's there yet. From a business standpoint, I like it in certain elements. For example, breweries. You're raising capital for your equipment, but also your investors are your customers. So there are certain areas that it fits very well, and it from a long-term viability, it's developing. Now, back to sort of the current environment where you're in a situation that you need capital today. As I mentioned earlier, the banks are, in essence, risk-based. So it may be difficult to go to the local bank and get a loan. There are programs out there, whether it's Fundbox, Cabbage, QuickBook Capital, Loan Builder, that allows you to basically access capital. And most of the programs let you leverage your current receivables. And I'll use this example. Let's say I have a $50,000 invoice that a customer owes me, and I call them up and they're like, Rick, I can't get it to you for 3 weeks. And I know payroll is 2 weeks away. And I know I can't go to the bank to cover payroll with a new loan, et cetera, in that short period of time in this environment. That's where I could go to a loan builder, a QuickBooks Capital, or something of that nature, and set up an agreement to fund that short-term receivable and pay it back when the customer pays and meet payroll. So it's a working capital tool. It's expensive. It's meant to be very short-term, but it is a solution that has basically been validated over the last few years that people are using to help them in their businesses in the short term. I'll end with traditional banks, traditional bank relationships. Quite frankly, I've found over this environment that the local bank relationships, are the preferred method, especially as you're building a long-term business and really having those, one of those, the banks is your advisor as well, to have that communication is the preferred method. But there are tools that are creative to help people through this environment and evolving to help you in the long term, especially as you're developing your overall business plan. Next slide. And back up one. Okay, so here I've just put a few examples of equity crowdfunding, to kind of give you a sense of, what is it? And these from different platforms, but one on the left is the Wine Collective. They're based out of Baltimore, and they're looking to raise $50,000 as a note, the 10% interest. As you can see, they're a little behind on their funding. They've got 27 days left. One of the things that you can do is look into the company and their financials behind it. And obviously, I'm not recommending any of these companies as examples. There's a brewing company there that's raised $102,000 with 79 investors. I think I did the math, it's like $1,200 an investor. And then over to the right, I threw this in there because, quite frankly, at the top, I mentioned the funeral homes. There's someone looking to invest capital in a funeral home or raise money to acquire a funeral home. So it's really getting creative on, what people are doing with crowdfunding, and, is this replacing or, sort of evolving with angel investing, to help you get to, that point in time where you can be, develop your business. Now, caution to all is that you have to know your business model and where you're headed. One of the things I profess is that if you're doing something like this, think about the second financing, not the first. If I go do an equity crowdfunding and I have 1,000 investors, it allows me to basically get my prototype done. And I know I'm going to need $10 million after that. A private equity group is going to look at you and say, you have 1,000 people with you. That's not our business model. So I highly recommend looking at business models in your own, as well as anyone you're doing business with. Go on their website, see what their mission, see what their model is, just to make sure they fit where you are, and actually it'll help you in your diligence to find the right party. So this is equity crowdfunding is evolving. It can be a tool today. I look at more as a long-term, next 2 to 5 years, where people will be interested in investing. You'll have more, similar to the stock market, you have more information, more people following companies, making sure you're making the right investment. $100 is $100. So you really want to be cautious in where you go with it. And that said, I think this is the end. Richard, I guess the next slide. Just a sense of, this is how I'm changing the G Suite or the startup portal model. G Suite, we were doing seminars in startup portal. We're now going to the web. So we've got to change. I don't see active, people coming into the office, especially over the summertime in this environment. So we're going to the web and putting on seminars. Next slide. And with that said, we'll end here. If you can go to the next slide with questions. Feel free, if you're watching this and you need to have a conversation, feel free to reach out. Be glad to spend some time with you and be one of those trusted advisors that give you my 2 cents, may help you or hurt you, I don't know, but be glad to have that conversation. And even to the extent that on our website at the top, you'll see that I've built a cash plan, 13-week cash plan in G Suite, and you can download to Excel, but it's costs you nothing. You want to just pull it down, we're glad to send it to you to just kind of help lay out your next 13 weeks. And with that said, if there are any questions, glad to take them.
Any questions from anybody? It looks like Richard, you have one.
Yeah, I got a quick question. Clearly in the next 6 months, maybe even a year, volatility is going to be the issue that will be the greatest influence, I think, in terms of our business factors, reopening. Are there general trends, indicators that we should be paying more attention to than others with respect to the volatility that we're experiencing?
It's funny. I always relate back to certain industries, but quite frankly, in some respects, similar to 2016, where the economy was stagnant. If you look at that period of time, everyone had sort of a hold and place position, and industries opened up, buying started to occur, and you really found that the supply chain, from what I saw from various customers, experienced basically sort of had an under capacity, let's say, for the demand. So I think we're in this period of time that we honestly, do we know, right? How fast can we get the trend back up, and what are the needs are? I mean, I think what we've found with everything in our changing environment, what we've done over the last 8 weeks, individually and as businesses, we've changed rapidly. So I think as much as I'm not aware, I can't, project the future, but I think we can change pretty quickly overall to start operating as businesses, even if it's on a partial or partial basis.
Anybody have any other questions? I thought it was a very comprehensive plan that you laid out, different ways people can obtain loans, funding. Very good. Very, very good for right now, especially. And had some nice comments here from people. Great presentation. Thanks for the presentation. Great presentation. Again, this will be up on our website and CMC's website after this, so it'll have a nice long shelf life. So any of you that have been on this, if you want to share it when you see it on our page with others in yours, that'd be great. I'm sorry, Rick, what was that?
Yeah. One of the things I started earlier is we do keep things close to the cuff. I've been in environments where it's not easy, where you come in every morning and manage the cash flow and just see, okay, what's payroll? And quite frankly, the company I was with, we had the CEO and COO on the road for many weeks doing installations around the country, and they would send me the invoices, and I'd factor those invoices to get cash flow. So and my point there is that if there are people out there listening to this and they just want to have that conversation, be glad to have it. And anything I can do to help, my pleasure.
I really appreciate that, because really, ultimately, we are all in this together, especially right now at this time. So any other questions at all? Looks like there are not. So I want to thank everybody. And I do want to give a second to turn things over to our friends at CMC, who, as I said in the beginning of the show, without them, we couldn't be doing all that we're doing. So I'd like to introduce you. You've heard him, he asked a question, but this is Mr. Richard Turner, Executive Director of the Community Media Center and one of our best friends at the Chamber. So all yours.
Thanks very much, Mike. And Rick, great presentation. I know these are challenging times, and we have to carefully evaluate where we position ourselves as business. As a nonprofit, we're still a business, and we're trying to figure out how things change. People are cutting the cord on cable. That's changing our revenue model, and we have to be evaluating how we continue to support our mission and being able to deliver to our community. So this kind of information is really critical to us, even as a nonprofit. So it's really a great service. We appreciate what the Chamber does. And we're trying to get as much information out as possible, both on our traditional legacy cable channels, HD 1086 on Comcast, as well as channels 19 and 23. We've been increasing the amount of coverage that we're doing for our local governments, because we want to make sure that people are hearing about the local decision-making, because that's what impacts us, and what's going on Main Street is critical to our communities. So we feel like it's important for that information to be out. We want to be a valued partner in our community. So if you've got ideas of how we can be more effective in addressing the needs of business within our community, please contact me, because we're real interested in figuring out how we can gear up our services and make them fit the kinds of requirements that we're seeing as things shift. It's one quick observation. Previously, even 6 months ago, our business was based upon bringing cameras and microphones to a place. Now, courtesy of Zoom, everybody's got a camera and a microphone. So now we're sitting here trying to figure out what's our value proposition. And we know it's in support, service, knowledge, and those kinds of things. So we are really critically evaluating and want that kind of input from our business community of how we can be of service. So thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody who's here.
You are very, very welcome. I would like to say, anybody on this call, please share this with your friends. Let them know that any of the webinars that we're offering right now currently are absolutely free, whether you're a member or not. We want to help out the business community. We have a lot of good information coming down the pike, and there's a lot of the ones that we've had that are on our website right now. You just got to go down to where it says like blog posts at the bottom of our actual main page, and you can find them all. And again, that's at carrollcountychamber.org. So Rick, thank you so much for your presentation. I'd recommend that if anybody has any questions, you can always follow up with him personally. His contact information was at the end, or you can look him up on our website.
Thanks, Mike.
Very good. All right. So that being said, I'll let everybody get on with their day with the message: be kind, stay safe, shop local. We are absolutely all in this together. See you at our next webinar. Thank you.